and welcome to our presentation today on the Universal Publishing Association, its rise and progress. We'll begin with a thought for meditation. We'll read this passage. Let the truths that are the foundation of our faith be kept before the people. Some will depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. They talk science, and the enemy comes in and gives them an abundance of science. But it is not the science of salvation. It is not the science of humility, of consecration, or of the sanctification of the Spirit. We are now to understand what the pillars of our faith are, the truths that have made us a people what we are, leading us step by step. Review and Herald, May 25th, 1905. So here we're counseled to understand what are the pillars of our faith and our history as a people. Now, this has been very well documented amongst us as Millerites and Seventh-day Adventists, but our history as Davidian Seventh-day Adventists needs to be carefully chronologued and told. So we'll begin this journey today on specifically the history of the publishing work through Universal Publishing Association. It all began with this divinely appointed messenger with a message to bear to God's people. And of course, this is Brother Victor T. Houteff, who God rose up to bring the message of revival and reformation in the writings of the original Shepherd's Rod. So we're going to look at that history and a chronological table of the rise and progress of the Davidian Seventh-day Adventists. And this is recorded for us in track number 13. So we will go through these key dates step by step. Beginning in 1929 was the first present truth study given on Isaiah chapter 54 on January 6th. It isn't said, but it's presumed this was probably in the home of a private individual. In 1930, the truth of the 144,000 was revealed on February 1st. Shepherd's Rod Volume 1, a manuscript, 33 copies, were delivered to the leading brethren of the Seventh-day Adventist denomination in June of 1930. Later that year, 5,000 copies of the book were published on December 4th and made available for distribution throughout the church. And by this time, leading brethren had failed to respond to the manuscript, and so Brother Houteff was impressed to bring the message to the laity, to the church. In 1931, the first Shepherd's Rod adherent was excommunicated from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, so opposition was quickly arising. Also, the first Seventh-day Adventist medical doctor accepted the message in July, and I believe this was Brother Butterbaugh. In that year, the first tithe remittance was received on September 9th. So quickly, after opposition arose, the storehouse, literally the support that come in to support the storehouse, was shifted from the conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church to the newly founded Shepherd's Rod message. In 1932, the first trip was made in interest of the message in October. There are no details given, but it was probably somebody traveling to give a Bible study. In that year, Shepherd's Rod Volume 2, 5,000 copies were published on October 2nd and sold for a cost. Also, the first meeting was held in a public hall on November 12th. Continuing on, 1933, we had the first believer to desert the message, and unfortunately, wouldn't be the last. We also had the first worker sent into the field on February 14th. This was most likely Brother Harry Warden, who was one of the first ministers in the name of the message and won a number of converts in the Southern California area, including M.J. Bingham. Tract number 1 was first edition. 3,000 copies were published on August 24. And since Brother Houteff didn't have his own printing press, this was published at some print shop somewhere in that area in Southern California. 1933, the first Seventh-day Adventist minister accepted the message on December 15th. This was Brother E.T. Wilson, who was the president of the Texaco Conference at the time and an ordained Seventh-day Adventist minister. Tract 2, first edition, 3,000 copies were published on December 29th. In 1934, a conference investigating committee met with Brother Houteff on February 25th. Now, this is almost over 3 years after they received the manuscript, so they were clearly dragging their feet and had already begun to openly oppose the Rod message before this meeting, which was, as we read in Tract 7, really a rigged event. 1934, the first convention in the name of the Rod was held from February 25th to March 12th. This is something like a camp meeting. Tract 3, first edition, was published, 5,000 copies, on May 24th. The first issue of the Symbolic Code was published, Volume 1, Number 1, on July 15th. Tract number 4, first edition, 6,000 copies, published on August 28th. 1935, tract number 5, first edition, 6,000 copies, published on May 16th. So all of these, the first 5 tracts, plus Shepherd's Rod Volume 1 and 2, were all published in Southern California. 1935 was the year that the headquarters moved from Southern California to Waco, Texas on May 24th. And this was a contingent of 12 brethren that moved to start up Mount Carmel Center, Waco, Texas. 1936, the Waco Seventh-day Adventist Church closed its doors to Shepherd's Rod adherents in March of that year. Obviously, they didn't appreciate the message. Tract number 6, first edition, 6,000 copies, published on June 8th. Tract number 7, first edition, 6,000 copies, published on the same day. 1937, the Constitution and bylaws of the, quote, Shepherd's Rod Seventh-day Adventist was written. Now notice, this was a full 7 years after the message first came in 1930, the first published work. So the publishing work preceded Constitution and bylaws. This is very important, as we will get later in our history after the death of Brother Houteff. In that year, 1937, tract number 8, first edition, 6,000 copies, published on November 15th. 1938, the first European trip was made in May 21st. We don't know who that was, but it was obviously a trip to introduce the message to the old country. 1940, tract number 9, first edition, 15,000 copies, published on January 31st. Tract number 10, first edition, 6,000 copies, published on August 24th. And then tract 11, first edition, 6,000 copies, published on August 23rd. 1941, we had the first senior Sabbath school lessons were mailed out. The flag of Christ's kingdom was designed in November. We see a picture of that in Fundamental Beliefs and also in tract 13, the green kingdom flag. Tract number 13, first edition, 25,000 copies, published on December 10th of that year. 1942, the Bible Teacher's Correspondence Course was initiated. The Catalog and Syllabus Rules Manual, 5,070 copies, published on November 28th, and this was part and parcel of the Ministerial Training Program, also known as the Davidic Institute, or DLI. In 1943, the organization was renamed the General Association of Davidian Seventh-day Adventists. And at that year, the Leviticus, the Constitution and bylaws of the Davidian Seventh-day Adventists, was published on February 12th, 5,075 copies. The main reason for this reorganization was to meet the need of young Davidian men who were of drafting age. And the church abandoned them and refused to support their non-combatant status. So Brother Houteff was forced to reorganize a religious organization that would be recognized by the state so that they could grant the non-combatant conscription status to Davidian young ministers so they wouldn't have to bear arms in the war conflict. Also in 1943, the first children's Davidian Sabbath school lessons were mailed, kindergarten, primary, and intermediate divisions. So we see a rapid expansion of the publishing work in all dimensions, from training of Bible workers, children, and then getting the message out to the church as the leaves of autumn. 1943, continuing, the Fundamental Beliefs and Directory of Davidian Seventh-day Adventists, 5,100 copies published March 4th. Tract number 14, first edition, 35,095 copies published on April 30th. The first fellowship certificates issued along with ministerial credentials in June. This was the first graduating class from the DLI. Then the bequeathment certificates were first provided in September. This came with the full financial development, including the Bank of Palestina, so a self-sufficient economic enterprise at Mount Carmel. In 1944, Answer Book Number 1, 29,760 copies published in May. Book 2, 29,564 copies published in June. Answer Book 3, 29,815 copies published in July. Answer Book 4, 30,000 copies published in August. And then Answer Book 5, 30,000 copies published in December. So this is all found in tract number 13, second edition. Now, the remaining 10 years under Brother Houteff's supervision from 1944 to 54, we have these major developments. In 1944, the large study charts were produced as a set of 18. In 1946, the Entering Wedge tract was published. Also that year, Brother Houteff published an A.B. Dick offset duplicator for the purpose of in-house printing. Prior to that, all the tracts were published at print houses in the Waco area. They were not owned by Brother Houteff. And at that time, 1946, it began the production of the Timely Greeting sermon addresses. And in this way, Brother Houteff was able to take the sermon and have it converted into a printed tract in a very short order, and print everything at Mount Carmel without dependence on the world. In 1947, the Eat Right Cookbook was published. 1950, General Conference Special was published. 1951, the White House Recruiter was published. 1953 to 54, the Timely Greetings from Volume 1 to Volume 2, Number 14, were revised and reprinted, all at Mount Carmel. In 1954, the Symbolic Codes, Volume 10, Numbers 1 and 2, were published after a 9-year absence, and that completed the work of Universal Publishing Association under the direction of the prophet, Brother Victor Houteff. So the Rod Message by 1954 was complete and ready to take to the church. And then in February of 1955, the prophet dies. So, let's look at this literature in its original format. Shepherd's Rod Volume 1 and 2. Here's one of the 33 hectograph copies that were given to the leading brethren in 1930. This copy is located at the General Conference Archives. Later, it was published as a soft cover in December 4, 1930, and then Volume 2 was published as a hardcover book in October 2, 1932. And both of these were sold for a cost. They were not given out for free. That was the tract literature. The pocket-sized tract literature was distributed without cost or obligation as leaves of autumn throughout the grass of Laodicea. So here's a collage of some of that literature: Timely Greetings, miscellaneous tracts, numbered tracts, beautiful assortment of artwork, over 75 pieces in total that were distributed literally by the millions throughout Laodicea. So here's a complete original Shepherd's Rod literature located at a Seventh-day Adventist institution. So they have this all archived in pristine condition. And that was one of the ways we were able to digitize and reproduce it exactly the way Brother Houteff published it, because there are archives of this in many locations. All of this work was accomplished by a very small group, if you will, a publishing committee. Editor, Brother Victor Houteff. The assistant editor, shown in this picture, is that tall gentleman, M.J. Bingham. Associate editor, Mrs. Sophia Hermison. That was the mother of Florence Houteff, who's standing there next to Brother Houteff. Associate editor, Mrs. Genevieve Bingham. That's the other lady with the baby. That was Bingham's lawful, legal first wife. And then circulation manager, Mrs. L.M. Georgel. Now, Florence played a role as stenographer. She recorded the timely greeting sermon addresses in shorthand and then later transcribed them into a draft longhand that was later proofread and corrected by Brother Houteff and then turned into a printed tract. So she also had an important role in the publishing work. But this is essentially all that did all of that work. It was done in the B8 administration building. Here it was completed in 1937. Here's a picture of it in 1942, I believe. On the right-hand side, on the lower portion, was the print house, and then above, the apartment where Brother Houteff lived. And here's an inside view from the middle over the infamous 11th hour clock, looking eastward towards the portion of the building where the publishing work took place. And according to records, the printing house ran 6 days a week, 24 hours a day. And at its peak in the 1954, there was upwards of 50,000 pieces of literature sent out to Laodicea every month. Quite an impressive feat. So here are the tracks, numbers 1 to 7. Notice there were multiple editions, track 1 up to 3 editions of these. Track 3, for example, has a 3rd edition, and the question becomes, well, what should we publish today? And it would logically be the latest edition that Brother Houteff published because they were revised. Track 3, for example, the latest edition has 128 pages, whereas the 2nd edition only has 102. So there is differences, and so we should take the latest version that Brother Houteff published as the authoritative voice of the rod. Tracks numbers 8 to 15, multiple editions, except for the case of volumes number 10 or tracks number 10 and 11. Beautiful artwork. Some of it was colored. The colored cover work was published before 1946 at a local print house. Once Brother Houteff had the A.B. Dick duplicator, that was black and white. So all the color or the cover artwork was black and white after that, including the timely greetings. And that's the way the originals were. Here's some miscellaneous tracks. Some of those covers were colored cardstock. Now, once again, these were published before 1946 at print houses in the Waco area. After 1946, all the track cover art was black and white. Timely Greetings Volume 2, there was a total of 98 sermon addresses published from August 3rd, 1946 to April 22nd, 1950. Had these beautiful covers. These went out once a week. As we mentioned before, the work from transcribing the sermon, taking it in shorthand, and converting it into a printed tract took on the order of 1 week. So it was a very efficient operation where Brother Houteff could deliver a sermon and have it printed out in published form in a timely greeting within a week. So this dispels the whole myth about the alleged sermon addresses that are found in the new codes. If Brother Houteff wanted this published, he could have had them published, but he didn't. The Symbolic Code series from Volume 1, Number 1 to Volume Number 9 was published from 1934 to 1943, and then after a 9-year absence, Volume 10, Number 1 and 2 came out in 1954. It was initially a newsletter format, and then starting with volume 2, numbers 3 and 4, it went to a beautiful magazine-style layout with this wonderful cover. And then some of the later volumes, number 7, 8, and 9, had some really dramatic and beautiful artwork on the covers. The large study charts came out in 1944, colored under the supervision of Brother Houteff by a couple of the young women there. Sister Bonnie Smith was one of the ladies. Helen Wormerl was the other young lady that colored these. And Brother Houteff, according to Sister Bonnie, was very particular about the coloring scheme. And we can understand why, because colors do have theological significance or meaning. Here's a couple other charts. The temple chart with a golden bowl, and there's been a lot of controversy over what's the correct version of this bowl. And what it is that after Brother Houteff died, people have stepped in and altered this and tampered with the original message. And it's very significant, but we have studies on that elsewhere. So, after Brother Houteff died, it brings us to the really important question: how was the work of Universal Publishing Association preserved or maintained after 1955? It had to go somewhere. So let's chronologue that history. Well, Sister Houteff hijacked the message and literally ran it into the ground. From 1955, and by 1962, the message had been renounced, literally destroyed, burned up. The property had been liquidated, so the question became, well, what happened to the rod message? Well, there were faithful Davidians that reorganized, saw this coming, and they reorganized in Vista, California in 1961. And here's a picture of that group at their meeting. And this association reorganized to oppose the apostasy of Florence Houteff and her council. And their primary focus was to restore the original rod message, tract literature, and reprint it as facsimile or photographic reproductions of the original, and they were the exact same size and layout. And later, that association moved from Southern California to Salem, South Carolina in 1970. And here's some of the literature from Salem, and then we'll notice here that the rod tract literature was reprinted as facsimile copies in original size and layout. The cover artwork was the same for the timely greetings. Okay. So literally photographic reproductions of the original. Exact typesetting, everything. It was not altered in any way. Then the Salem Association broke up 1974 over doctrinal differences, and the group reorganized back in California, in Yucaipa, Southern California, and existed from 1974 to 1986. And they continued to publish the original Shepherd's Rod literature. The tracts were printed with the original format and typeset. Here's some examples. However, the timely greetings, the cover art changed dramatically from the original. Although the text inside was facsimile or photographic, it turned out that a certain Wanda Bloom was the one that took it upon herself to begin to tamper or change the rod artwork. This created quite a controversy and ended up with Wanda breaking off in 1983 to form her own association, which exists today out in Red Bluff, California. After Yucaipa, the message moved to Mountaindale, and this is the literature they published from 1988 to 2005. Now we'll notice that their tract cover artwork was facsimile, original artwork, and they published this for about 10 years until around 1988. And at that time, the printing plates were wearing out, and so they began to digitally retypeset, the message, the tracts. They published the timely greetings. The text was original, but the cover art followed the example of Yucaipa. It was tampered or not original. And as time progressed, Mountaindale eventually quit printing facsimile copies and has completely gone over to digitally typeset. And everything's changed. The cover artwork, the coloring, everything. So it's no longer original. So out of necessity, well, before we go there, let's look at these storehouse movements in this era from 1930 to 2005. So the message started in Glendale, California with Brother Houteff, 1930 and 1935, and then 1935 it moved to Waco, Texas. And there the association existed until 1962 when it was dissolved by Florence Houteff and her council, and literally sold off and liquidated. However, God rose up faithful Davidians, they called themselves 100% rod-only Davidians, and they reorganized back in Southern California in Vista and existed from 1961 to 1970. On the basis of the study of Ezekiel 47 going eastward, they relocated the storehouse to Salem, South Carolina in 1970. This was a rest home that was started by Davidians under the during the time of Brother Houteff. And so they believed that that was an important part of the work. Brother Houteff actually visited the place and said that this would be an important part of the work in the future. Little did he know that the storehouse would move there for a period of time from 1970 to 74. But because of doctrinal differences, when Don Adair moved in and took over, there was a split. And Davidians reorganized back in Yucaipa, Southern California, 1974 to 86. They kept the original message alive. Don Adair, when he took over, no longer continued to print individual tracts. He compiled the message into big volumes and sold them for a cost, in total apostasy against the mandate of the message. Later, Yucaipa found out about a group that had been cast out of Salem and relocated up to Mountaindale. So in 1986, Yucaipa joined with a small group in Mountaindale and brought with them the printing press. And Mountaindale, from 1988 to 2005, printed the original Rod literature. However, by 2005, Mountaindale was printing original literature. It was all typeset and altered significantly. So out of necessity, the storehouse had to move eastward to Hartford, Connecticut. And UPA7.org arose in 2006 and was there until 2012, in which the entire work of restoring the original Shepherd's Rod message back, including the charts, back to its original state, was completed. And then from the point 2012 forward, the message is to go forward through multiple storehouses throughout the world. And we'll address that more in another video after this. So, the UPA7.org literature from 2006 to the present encompasses all of the original 15 tracks, the miscellaneous tracks, Timely Greetings Volume 1 and 2, all in the original format, layout, and artwork, Answer Books 1 to 5, the symbolic codes, and digital versions of Shepherd's Rod Volume 1 and 2. As well, we're the only association that publishes the original 1944 study charts, and these were restored and made available at the GC session in Atlanta in 2010. So not only the large size, but the small size charts as well. So here's the progression of the Universal Publishing work from 1930 to 2010 and onward into the future. So in another presentation, we'll look more about how this work of the publishing is distinct and separate from the headquarters, and when we should look forward to the headquarters being reestablished in full. So this concludes our study. We thank you for your time. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact us anytime. We are upa7.org. Our email address, upa5453@gmail.com. Our phone, 860-798-3672. Please leave a message. We'll get back with you. Or better yet, visit our website, yparish.org, and leave a comment on the history of the Universal Publishing Association. May God richly bless your search for truth as for hidden treasure, and to know that we have not followed cunningly devised fables. Godspeed.